Yeah. All right. It's the Open Peace Podcast. Hey, everybody. My name's Jared. We got Amir and Kane. Abood is too tired to be with us. And we also got Tarek. He's from Australia. So make fun of him for that. He deserves it. The entire country deserves it.
Nice way to start us off, Jared. Anyway, I'm happy.
Dissing an entire country.
Yeah. Oh, come on. You know me. It's not the first time I've done that. Name a country in the world I haven't insulted relentlessly. Name one.
Ignorant American act, but it's not real.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
That's how I know you're not Israeli, because you have a true Israeli would have said a terrible country but beautiful women, and you spent 10 minutes talking about Australian women. So you're clearly still an American, by the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I mean,
once again, you haven't.
Does Australia have women? I'm pretty sure that's all just spiders over there.
Yeah, they wouldn't surprise. They have a high rate of killing their husbands, so It's a bit of stuff,
You know what? I think I'm going to stay away from that.
No, best country, best people.
Why don't we talk about the Middle East? That's
yeah. Bring up a Middle Eastern country for me to shit on. Actually, that's not a good idea, considering.
Yeah. No, it's not. So why don't you start off saying again where you're from, Tarek, or where your family are from?
So pretty much my family, I'm going to call myself an Australian Palestinian. I actually have Israeli citizenship, though. It's kind of weird. My family's in East Jerusalem, split between East Jerusalem and Hebron. Mm-hmm. So I usually, whenever I go back, I'm usually between those places near the old city, or I go back to Hebron for a bit. So it's pretty exciting in a way.
Yeah. So you're also you're a citizen. You're an Israeli.
Yeah. No, I'm the only. Well, my family's the only one in our extended family that I know of, because my dad took it. He was ahead of the game.
Like back in the 80s, he took the offer.
Yeah, he took it. No, he got it quite. I'm trying to think when he got it, but my grandpa said, "Look, they're not leaving. They annexed Jerusalem." I think it was around the time just after they annexed Jerusalem, they started they added all these places. If you look at a map of Greater Jerusalem, there's villages that were never considered part of Jerusalem.
Oh yeah.
So it's So my dad and a few of his friends, they said, "Look, we're here. We don't want to leave, so we'll grab the citizenship." And it honestly makes life significantly easier. When my friends come in and out, they have to go through the Jisr, the bridge in Jordan, which I've been told is terrible. So I'm pretty lucky in regards. So I get to go from Ben Gurion, so it makes life a lot easier. As long if you have a passport, it does make life a lot easier. If you have the Passer, the red one, it's terrible. But if you have the nice blue one makes life significantly easier.
For sure. And it's part of the complexity of this place.
You have that luck, obviously, but then there's of course what you want to see for the rest of your people.
I'll say my life is significantly easier than most.
Yeah,
I don't think East Jerusalem's living in luxury. I have friends that are Israeli citizens, and they're living in either the old city or they're living in where they still have a lot of problems and stuff. But compared to the West Bank, stuff like that, compared to Palestinians living in the West Bank or in other areas, it's completely different. There's still issues, but.
Of course.
And they don't really feel Israeli. I know some do, some Druze, stuff like that definitely feel Israeli, but
not just some Druze. You can walk up to any Druze in this country and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm the most Israeli motherfucker here. I'm more Israeli than the Jews."
Well, every Druze I've met, every Druze I've met, they'll say "Yeah, look, there's some problems, but you're not allowed to swear at the army." That's been my experience. You can say the country's bad, the government's bad, but not the army. The army's not bad. Every Druze person said that, which is the opposite of what many Palestinians I know will say. They'll say, "Oh, the country's okay. There's some issues, but they want the citizenship, but the army sucks." So it's kind of the reverse.
Yeah,
because we deal with Magavniks.
Magav's a whole thing of its own. But I mean, even if the West Bank Palestinians. Any Arab who has citizenship is not required to do the army. Arabs are exempt. The army
aren't Druze mandatory?
Druze mandatory, yes, but the reason being is because back in the 50s or something,
the elders made a deal or something.
Yeah, it's not the elders made a deal. The elders just got together and went to the government and said, we're citizens, we want to be part of the draft. and the government was like, more soldiers, fuck it, we'll add you to the list. For better or for worse. Like, it was the elders back in the 50s who asked for it.
The Druze that don't serve are the ones up in the Golan,
The Syrian ones.
Yeah, they're considered a separate group by the government. But I mean, for the most part, the government drafts you based off of your ethnicity. It's kind of like how the system works over here. So like you can tell how assimilated a certain ethnic group is into the wider Israeli society by off of, like, are you going to get drafted?
Yeah. So like the other Circassians drafted, I know they serve.
Circassians are drafted. So ours. God, I'm blanking on it right now. How can I?
Bedouins have the option, right?
Yeah, Bedouins have the option.
Bedouins have the option. Arabs
in the north, I know there's in the Galilee, some Bedouin tribes in the Galilee serve stuff like that.
Yeah. Also in the south, Tarek, I'm from a little kibbutz down south near Rahat, and you have quite a decent percentage down of the
I know that the ones in Galilee, so because there's a few villages up north where I know they serve. I didn't. Yeah. I've never been to Rahat, stuff like that. It's a whole other level out there.
I see.
Totally want to go there.
Well, next time you're down, I'll take you, no problem.
I think it's safer for you than me, man. Even though you look like one of us, at the same time, I think like they're less. I've heard it's very dangerous down Rahat. I've heard.
I tell you what, right? So like that's where my kibbutz is. So I've lived there for many, many years, and go in and out of Rahat a lot, and there are complex issues down there. You know what I mean, between rival tribes and stuff down there, and unfortunately, I grew up to hearing a lot of gunshots and that kind of stuff from Rahat, unfortunately. But I think in the recent, like, I've seen change. I left the country for 6 years and came back, and I have seen some changes over there, people wanting kind of a more peaceful lifestyle, and, actually people protesting for getting more police into the cities down in the south, and taking care of the violence in the Arab sector in the Bedouin sector down there, because it's something that has kind of been a problem that hasn't, nobody's been looking at it and taking care of it. So hopefully, if this country, I think in general over here, if we got strict on illegal weapons and stuff, we would see a reduced rate of crime, So hopefully, it is hard. It is hard, but it's something that needs to be done, Kane, like
it is. It is. The whole region is saturated with firearms, though.
That's it.
It really is. It's kind of like when a lot of Israelis talk about how, like, we need, and obviously things have gone down since the wall, stuff like that. But when Israelis, for a lot of Palestinians, it takes like an amazing amount of strength not to like really rise when Israelis say, because of the wall, that's why things haven't happened. It's like, it's a mixture of Israeli intelligence, the Palestinian Authority working with them a lot, because there are so many guns in East Jerusalem and Wadi Ara. Like in Faham, like at one stage, like a person a week was being murdered. It's like
it's still that
people
bad.
want to get guns. If people want to get guns,
the wall isn't really to stop like gun violence. The wall was there. The wall was put up to stop like suicide bombers who just
if you talk to Israelis, they'll say like they make it sound like the wall is like stopping attacks, and it's like I think it is intelligence combined with the Palestinian Authority, like the security forces there, because there's guns throughout. Like on the other side of the wall, like anyone can get guns, or in the Bedouin sector they can get guns. So it's really relying on people kind of. I think it's the intelligence under the table, stuff like that, and people also, kind of just accepting the status quo, for better or for worse.
Sure, no, I agree with you completely there, Tarek. I wanted to ask you, your family down in Hebron, because I kind of see that as a city that has so much potential for cohesion, like there is in Jerusalem, but the potential isn't being fulfilled. We have very extremist settlers down there. There's kind of friction between the communities down there sometimes, and it's just so sad because it's the burial place of our joining father Abraham, and it should be a place that should be open for tourism, and the market should be open, and I'd just like to hear what you think about Hebron and what you can tell us a little bit about.
Honestly, Hebron's kind of it's a weird thing. It's probably more conservative than most. I'd say it's probably the most conservative Palestinian city. Like I haven't been to Gaza, but talking to people from Gaza, Hebron sounds a lot more conservative, like much more traditional. And so it's a tough one. Whenever like I have a lot of Israeli friends, stuff like well, I have a few Israeli friends a lot, but so whenever we talk about certain things, I'm like, yeah, okay, we can work this out. But then you see the stuff in Hebron, it's kind of like, it's kind of like it is a flashpoint, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
As in, it is especially the old city. If you look at the old city, you do have people there, and like, look, there is a pretty rough history. Whether it's a Hebron massacre, and then you have also there on the Cave of the Patriarchs. But to be honest with you, the Hebron, if you look at the old city, H2, how things are, like, it's almost like I know as somebody who lives there, when people say Students for Justice in Palestine, some of the stuff there is exaggerated. In Hebron, it's really not. Like in Hebron, like there is genuinely like checkpoints within neighborhoods, and like they're shut out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I agree on paper, it should be the place where we come close together, but so should Jerusalem. But if you look at Jerusalem and Hebron, it's like there's like people collaborate a lot more in Jaffa, and even between settlements, you look at Hussein and other places compared to like Hebron and Jerusalem, where people interact. But then again, if you talk to Yishai Fleischer, he'll tell you, oh, look, we actually get along with certain tribes, stuff like that. So I think that it is really bad there, but it's a really tough situation, to be honest with you, because if you leave the old city of Hebron, economically, Hebron's like a lot of people are struggling, but it is a lot of like, it's a boom town in a lot of ways, a lot of industry, stuff like that. Then you go to the old city and it's just dead. Like shops are closed.
So sad. It's sad. Yeah. It's very sad. I think definitely Yishai is like an outlier, right? Like he's got connections with a few families down there and stuff. I think
like
he's just.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say the culture there. So there's how people feel and how people live, if that makes sense. So obviously most people are against. I'd say most people are against normalization, but not how the Palestinian Authority and others implement it. So people obviously will not like what the Israeli army is doing. They will probably have a lot of issues with the settlements, but at the same time they have to eat. So they're going to work. There's no other options really. So they're going to work in settlements, or they're going to deal with settlers. So the settlers in Hebron get their, like I know for a fact, like they get their mattresses from. There's a big mattress factory in Hebron, stuff like that.
Sure. Carpets.
Yeah. So like there's going to be some sort of relations. Since the 90s, at the beginning, the Palestinian Authority really did do some really bad things when they went into Hebron, and the Israelis did back them, to be honest. And so there are some families that are much more comfortable with the settlers, but the majority obviously are very uncomfortable because it's not necessarily, it's just the attitude, to be honest with you. Like, as in, Hebronites are like known to be like quite stubborn, quite like this. Yeah. But the settler, I think maybe that's why maybe the settlers behave in a certain way, but they do genuinely. We've all seen the video and stuff like that. Like, are they like that every day? Probably not. But as in, it's like I don't think there'll be any peace anytime soon. To be honest with you, with the way things are over there.
You don't expect. It's interesting because something we've seen, like with a lot of our other guests, a concern that's been expressed is that if we were to find some sort of solution where we bring the two sides together, be it in like a federation or canton system, then they would be happy to do that. Like many of the Palestinians that have been asked say that if we were doing it, they would be happy to go along with it, but they wouldn't be able to actively support it if we left out Gaza, because because we have obviously Palestinians there and they can't say, we'll take that deal, we're happy, we like that, leave the Gaza. So how do you feel about that sort of idea?
To be honest with you, like there's what I would bet on and there's what I would feel. So positively speaking, like I saw, I'm friends with Rafi, who helped write, your recent guests are here, him and Rafi helped do the federation thing. So if you had asked me in the past, I thought the best case scenario would be, there's a guy called Rabbi Yehuda HaKohen, and he kind of wants one state between the river and the sea, but giving Palestinians equal rights. He's discussed the right of return, stuff like that. So I thought that was the best case possible scenario, because to be honest, if I was a betting man, I would bet that it would be a more polished version of Mordechai Kedar's plan. the Emirate one, but not actually Emirates. So pretty much what I honestly thought was going to happen is that the Palestinian Authority would slowly kind of disintegrate, and you'd get like warlords in each city, and that would, because Netanyahu's current thing is maximum land, minimum responsibility. So that means that like the Israelis can slowly expand. Area B kind of just remains under Israeli control, and Area A, these people keep the peace. The Israelis allow things to operate. That's what if I was going to bet, that's what I'd bet on what was happening. Because you look at it. Even President Rivlin said recently when was it Joshua's well or Joshua's too that was damaged in
on Aribal,
yeah. So when that was damaged, like Rivlin wrote to Benny Gantz saying our land is bountiful in all these sites, and it's like, so this is Rivlin. He's not a right wing guy, so it's one for better or for worse.
Rivlin's center right.
To us, like compared to Gantz, for us compared to like Bennett.
Anybody compared to Bennett would be left wing.
For us, like he seems pretty like moderate. For us, he seems pretty moderate, like stuff like that.
Yeah,
nice guy.
He's a member of a dying breed, the moderate Likudnik.
So for him to say it's like our land is filled with this area, stuff like that. If you go to Jericho, just outside you have Mitzvah Yericho, you have all these places. It's really is like one country. Obviously, inside Area A, that's where you see different. But for better or for worse, it is one country. Like if you're an Israeli living in most settlements, like if you're in a brand new one, okay, the plumbing's not so good, the lighting's a bit annoying, but you're still going to go to an Israeli hospital. You still call the army, so it's like one country. So ideally, I would like a canton system or a federal plan, ideally. But where it's heading, if I was going to bet on something, I would think more legitimization of the status quo long term, if I was going to bet. But I'll be positive and say I like the federal solution kind of thing, just because of, unless it was going to be exactly on the 67 borders, which is not going to happen. Like Gush Etzion is going to stay, Ariel's going to stay. And even though I don't like those borders, you can sell those to people. You can sell the West Bank, you can sell these things to people, but it's just not going to happen. And so, I'll probably bet on a legitimization of the status quo. Ideally, I wouldn't mind a federal solution. But what about you guys? Because to be honest with you, I've talked to a lot of Israelis. I know the idea of not maintaining like the 80% Jewish thing. It is a thing which scares a lot of Israelis.
It does, and I mean that's the thing that honestly worries me the most about this federal system. Just because, I want peace. The Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza do deserve full human rights and status with citizenship, of course. But I mean, like, if we end up absorbing both Gaza and the West Bank, because like the Palestinians, like as you said before, wouldn't be able to support the plan if it left out Gaza. I'm just gonna say, like, I would. Even the federal system itself, like changing the state, kind of bothers me a bit, just because like I want to be Israeli. I want to have that flag. I want to have that government. I want to have that pride.
Like that, you would be able to maintain that, but the Palestinians would also be able to have, if we want to call it Israel and they want to call it Palestine, then that's okay. That's sort of the idea, right?
But that's kind of the thing. But I mean, at the end of the day, you can call it however you would like, but at the end of the day, I still want there to be a flag with the Star of David on it. I want to be able to wave that around like a jackass when I go to foreign countries.
I get that. I think Rafi and others still like their whole idea behind it is that where Israel's heading now, it's like that plan will kind of allow them to preserve the Jewishness of their areas, because it's like, okay, where it's heading now, it's like pretty much everything besides Area A is kind of hinted at being on the table long term. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that's like Area A, it's like no one wants that. It's filled with Palestinians, but everything else, it's like, who knows? Yeah. And even then, even if it's not annexed, it's like people can still live there. People can travel back and forth. So it's a weird situation, to be honest with you, because really, it's like when you look at why do Israelis not want to annex Area A? It's like they don't want to govern millions of people. They don't want to have the problem like what you're saying. They want it to be Israel, stuff like that. And it's like, okay, but how do you keep that going without pulling out of certain areas? And that's not either, like I think there's 750,000 people living across the Green Line now, like Israeli citizens.
Probably more than that.
Like that. I mean, that number goes up and this is something I also complain about as a citizen, because what is it, like 70% of all subsidized like housing is in the West Bank.
Unfortunately,
Like-
if you go to the Galilee and
like- Yeah, and it is
It's a weird thing I say. It's not gonna. It's part of the land. Like I know people that live in Ariel, and like his life is not like he pays his taxes, he works. Like his life is no different than someone who like lives just across. Like between Ramat Gan and Ariel, it's like cheaper housing.
Yeah.
And he's a bit worried when he drives, when he leaves the settlement. That's about it. Like there's
Fresher air as well. Fresher air, cleaner air.
So as in, to me, like I kind of look at it because a lot of Israelis do come and tell me they're like, you know, like even like I have Israeli citizenship. They're like, how good is it? You know, it's like A, B, and C. Like, and I'm like, look, I kind of look at it like how the way you like, you know, if you talk to someone from Russia like 120 years ago, he'd be like, how amazing is the Russian Empire? Look at the architecture. Look at Moscow. Look at St. Petersburg. We've got Tchaikovsky. We've got Tolstoy. We've got all this. And then it's like, if you're a Jew in that area, like, this is all true. I don't experience it the same way though. As in, like, I'm kind of scared to be here. I don't really have any stability. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, many Palestinians, even the ones that like the ones with Israeli citizenship, they don't. It doesn't feel like fully a part of it. Like you have Israeli friends, but you don't feel like fully a part of the state. Stuff like that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand that.
It's not even a malicious feeling towards the state. Like even the one, like as in the ones that live pretty good. It's not like they don't hate the flag. Many Palestinians do. Many Palestinians, when they see the flag, are very uncomfortable. But they kind of just like, okay, Israel's a Jewish state. I'm not Jewish.
Resounding indifference.
Yeah. But no, I get Israeli concerns, to be honest. But it's, for me, it's like, okay, if it's all about preserving that, like the demographics game, which I would understand to an extent, it's like, okay, what are the options exactly? Because it's like, okay, it's like, if it's all, because it's like, okay, if I need to preserve the demographics, well, then you might as well make an argument to preserve the security. So you're going to keep the Jordan Valley, and then it's like, I'm going to keep these places, and it's like, it kind of just keeps up tweaking more and more. Like, okay, I'm going to.
I was going to say, like, I think the reason why it's just going in that direction is I think in the future, unless something really changes, what's going to happen is like Israel is just going to go fuck it and annex all of the West Bank.
Yeah.
Like even Area A, they're going to have to offer them citizenship. It's going to be up to them to take it, but the government's going to have to offer it to them.
I think they're too maybe, but I think they're too smart in a way. Like,
well, I mean, the thing is, like, there's no other option. Like you said, like the Jordan Valley, Bibi put the Jordan Valley on the table. After the Jordan Valley, they're going to have to keep going and, you know, officially claim the settlements. And I mean, the settlements are already going to be right there. Like, no, you can't just annex the land around these Palestinian cities and then just say, oh yeah, no, that can totally be a state. Look at it, that's so fucking stable. Like, the government's going to have no option in the future because of the settlements to just straight up annex the West Bank. Even if they talk about it, I think there's going to be, like, West Bank is just going to officially all of it become part of Israel instead of army. Like the Palestinians will be dealing with like Israeli police, and Gaza is just going to be a thing all on its own. I think that's just the way it's going to head.
I don't think that maybe I don't know if they'd like have Palestinian police. I don't think they have Palestinian police. Maybe, but as in I am noticing a lot of Israelis, like the Kedar plan is getting a lot of traction, stuff like that. Like a lot of Israelis who come and spoke to me, they said, look, it's simple. We'll get rid of the PA. We'll put Emirates in charge, which I don't think people understand how much things have changed. Like as in, like, I don't know if you guys, like, I don't know if any of you guys went to the West Bank you guys don't look very old, but pre-Oslo. Like I've heard stories about it, but it was very different now. Like it was much more open. While now everyone's just moved into certain areas.
So one thing I hear from everybody is just like people thought Oslo was going to improve the situation, and then they look back on it thinking, God, I missed the days where I could just fucking go anywhere.
Oslo was a nightmare.
It's a nightmare.
It's a double-edged sword for a lot of people. So, especially for like Hebronites, as in because of the laws on like Israeli economic laws, a lot of things were built in Hebron. A lot of things were made in Hebron. There was a lot of jobs. And so, especially like in shoemaking, stuff like that. And then when the Palestinian Authority came, they didn't like put into just imported tons of stuff from China. And so all these factories overnight were just destroyed. And it is, even, I give him credit. Yeshua Fleischer talked about it. He said Israel backed the PA to crack down heavily on people. And so it's a really weird situation where you just have all these people moving in and out. And what Oslo has done is it's made the Palestinian society much more conservative, like much more conservative. It's led to the breakdown of a lot of institutions. Combine that with, it's made the country, it made it impossible to separate us. Like, it's actually made it impossible in a lot of ways. Like, as in,
What kind of institutions broken down, you think?
Yeah.
well, like if you look at it, so before Oslo, there was like the tribes were very weakened. Like a lot of the clan base is quite weakened. So you can look at the elections in the 1970s. People were elected on nationalist platforms. They had student unions. They had workers' unions. A lot of these social clubs that kind of allowed people to work together to network. And then with Oslo coming in, and also with the Second Intifada, a lot of this stuff broke down. A lot of like the most reactionary aspects of Palestinian society were like reborn. Whether it's like people becoming more religious, for better or for worse. Like there's some good things to it, and also for people in Jerusalem and Hebron, especially, not so much other places in Palestine, but Jerusalem and Hebron, the tribal aspect. Because, you know, when there's lawlessness in the streets, you're going to talk to your cousin, you're going to talk to your uncle, you're going to like say like, hey, there's people out in the streets, let's help each other out, let's put together a fund, this person's out of work. And so you've led to like if you look at pictures in the 70s and 80s, I'm not one of these people that like associates women not wearing a headscarf with like the be all and end all. I'm not one of these people who go, look how successful we were, you know, women wore miniskirts. But you know, like my aunt would say, like around late 80s, like at the end of the late 80s, early 90s, like there was definitely an Islamist trend. It's just kind of like the people said like secularism failed, everything failed, so they kind of like started moving towards like more Islamist stuff. So yeah,
isn't that when Harakat Hamas started, like the early 80s?
I think like it existed as a charity beforehand, but when it actually started taking act, like when it started actually conducting attacks, I think that was the late 80s, early 90s. Yeah, but before that, it existed as a charity, and like they would run mosques and stuff like that. Yeah,
I see. So they were kind of like on the sideline of society, if you like, and they were kind of
religious people in Palestinian society are usually, they're not seen like as crazy people. They're like people you can leave money with. They're people that respected. The people you can. They're usually actually educated. Like the most educated people, some of the most educated people in Palestinian society are like devout Islamists. Like really like there's a group called Hizb al-Tahrir, and they actually don't believe it. They're waiting for the Messiah to come, but they literally just sit around.
Wait, Hizb al-Tahrir, like same Islamist party that Majid Nawaz used to be a part of.
Possibly, yes, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And they like just they're really well educated. Like they're usually all engineers, stuff like that, and they just sit, discuss on, and like they discuss the hadith. They just sit around and pray.
Because all the videos I've seen of these, they talk like idiots. All their propaganda videos I've seen, at least their American branch.
I haven't seen the American one, but if you go to like Palestinian society, like they're very well educated, like very well educated. Like it's they just sit.
Palestinian society anyway to be highly educated. Like if you don't get a degree, it's seen as kind of strange, right?
Yeah, culturally, culturally there is a pressure. Like especially in Ramallah, Nablus, stuff like that. In the north, in the south, there is like it's getting there, but there is definitely like there is a bit of like a lot of credentialism to the point where like it's a bit ridiculous. Like if you study overseas, like you could literally like a bachelor overseas is like, oh, if you studied overseas, it's okay, as opposed to like a master's back home.
That's just more fuel for my theory that Palestinians in particular are just Arabized Jews.
Well, no, if you look at what was his name? There's that guy, Svi something.
Svimi Sinai.
Yeah, he's like literally his entire like it's possibly true that like a minority of Palestinians are Jews, but his entire thing is just they're all Jews. Like, oh, they're Jews. Look at this, they're Jews, and it's like every single person, you know.
Well, I mean, they probably, if I'm going to be honest, they probably nearly all I would think have like some sort of Jewish blood. I'm not saying they are Jews. I'm just saying Jews probably make up a non-negligible amount of the general ancestry.
Doesn't mean nearly all, though.
Yeah, I would say there's percentage, you know, there's definitely percentages in there, but you've got to remember that during the Islamic conquest, Jared, you know, there was a lot of movements of peoples, you know, between areas, and this whole region, you know, it's never known borders really.
There was movements of people. I think there was definitely, from what I gather, movements from the Crusades, because if you look at it, it's like the ones that came in would have married locals. Like I think it's like usually safe to say, like for example, most most Arab tribes, like the Fellahin, the peasant ones, they don't usually have accurate knowledge of their ancestry. Like they'll know which village they're from, stuff like that. But they'll have like usually a lot of the time a lot of interesting traditions, like very I think the word syncretic beliefs kind of thing.
What do you mean when they
So,
just
like,
like mix the two together?
Yeah, so like for example, like nearly every village, you guys can still find some of them within the 60s, without like in your side of the 67 borders, where there's like these shrines, and like the Fellahin used to like pray at these shrines. So like literally every village would have a shrine either to someone they would believe is like a biblical prophet or Islamic holy person, and it's like it kind of borderlines on paganism, but it's something which they would do because they're isolated. You know, while a lot of the bigger families and tribes were well aware of who their ancestry was on the male side.
Yeah.
The female side, like you don't, not as much. But the male side's like on the male side they're pure Arab, but then you look at them and they're like, you know what I mean? Like on the male side they'll be like, my family's like all the way back to this person or this person. Like, for example, you know, my family likes to say we come from, we're a subset of another clan, and we go, okay, we're from a few hundred years ago, the Tamimi clan. The Tamimi clan is from Ismail's grandson.
Right.
Now that's the folklore. That's true or not, that's another story, but that is the folklore behind it.
Yeah.
While the Fellahin don't have that. The Fellahin have like, you know, we have this tradition, we've been in this village, because the whole theory for us is that people came in, colonized, mixed, converted. People came in, and the Fellahin were just there and just accepted whoever came. So like they would have been Jews, then became Christians, then became Muslims. That's like the whole idea. I know that's actually true, but that's
so almost like the Aboriginals of the land.
In a way, like in a way.
Would you say that they're like more connected to the land than they are to their own bloodline? Is that sort of?
I would say so in a way, because for them, like the number one thing is their land. Like I think most of the refugees are Fellahin. I think so. I could be wrong, but I think so. So for them, like the most important thing is like their village, the land, stuff like that. As in, they became like, now they're obviously Muslim, stuff like that. But we have to remember most of Palestinian society was illiterate. So while they were Muslim, it's like, while the majority were Muslim, did they know what they're doing? If that makes sense. So it's like if you go to like, there's a town next to Bethlehem called Khidr, and you have like Muslims, like women wearing hijab, and they light candles at St. George's shrine, and like they like literally get like they grab like St. George's chains and like do this weird thing with it, and like there'll be a priest to bless them with the chains. That's because apparently they've just done that forever. So it's like, are these people Christians that pretended to become Muslim and then after a long time actually became Muslim, but then kept the practices, or like, you know what I mean?
There's a similar thing that happened with Jews, the Jews from Spain specifically. Like I believe the academics use crypto Jews because like the Inquisition forced them to publicly be Christian.
Yeah.
But they, you know, in the privacy of their own homes, they kept up with a lot of Jewish traditions. And like, so eventually you have like a lot of people in Spain and Portugal, as well as in the Americas, in Latin America, who like are Catholic. They openly say like, yeah, I'm Catholic, I go to church, but they do a lot of things that are really Jewish. And I mean, it's even to the point where there's like churches all over Latin America that are like called churches, but they just have the Star of David everywhere. And like people go to that and just like, oh yeah, this was obviously a church built by the Jews hiding from the Inquisition. You know, it was actually a synagogue. It just became a church when people gave up on that thing.
It's
a kind of a thing. Once, like for example, my grandparents, I think my grandma, Allah Hamma, could read, but I know like their grandparents, like the literacy was off the table. And so I know with them, like they used to do stuff which we kind of like, once people learned how to read, they're kind of like, okay, so let's stop this now. Like for example, a lot of families used to do tribal tattoos. Once people learned how to read, it slowly died out. They're like, okay, let's not do that anymore. Like even, so no one does it now, but when I was young, even until I think like even 2000s, people would not cut their hair until like they turned like 3. In Hebron, it used to be a thing like, okay, let's grow out our hair, and then at 3 we'll cut it. And now we say it's because you don't want to get the bad eye. You know, if you have sons, it was going to give you the bad eye, stuff like that. But then there's other stories, like my grandma would be like, yeah, a guy came in a long time ago and killed every boy, so now we grow out the hair. And then like when I say this, like some Jewish people be like, oh yeah, I got a haircut at 3 years old. They kind of thing, or it's like a certain age, or is it 3 days or 3 years old, something like that. I don't know what it is. So as in you have your first haircut at that time. The problem is that now people don't do that. As in like people are like, no, that's not, there's no religious basis to do that. Let's just not do it anymore. So
Right.
with as like literacy goes up, and with the Nakba as well, like as like with the population displacement, a lot of the traditions are just gone. And it's kind of weird. You've kind of like, because it makes sense if you're living in a village, like, are you going to really like go out of your way to build this big mosque, or like, are you just like, you're gonna like a lot of the houses will, like, people just lived in them for generations, and they just go and pray at the shrine thing. Like there's one in a friend of mine is from a village near Beitil, and in Beitil they actually have like a park, and there's actually a shrine inside there. And they say, I forgot which one, they say it's a biblical prophet, but the people in the village next to Beitil say it's like someone from their village a few hundred years ago.
Oh wow.
And they used to go and like pray around that shrine. So it's kind of, but this is the Fallahin, like the average, but like most of the other, like the big tribes weren't doing this. Not the big tribes, the more well-off people weren't doing this.
This is in just outside of Ramallah, yeah?
Yeah, just outside of Ramallah.
Oh, okay, fantastic. That's so interesting. I
think
never
there's
heard
one in Yitzhak.
about
I
this
think there's
shrine.
one in Yitzhak. Yeah, I think there's one in Yitzhak as well. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure there is one. But you know, it's something which it's not talked about because it's seen as like ignorance. It's like, oh yeah, we used to be ignorant back then. We used to be ignorant, like, you know, like.
I see. Before we were enlightened, I see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. You know, like it's a learning process. Like people, what they associate with, whether it's like their religion, stuff like that, like a lot of the time it's just traditions. You know, so it's in like the evil eye. That is like the evil eye exists in that religion, but you're not supposed to like tap the evil eye every time you go outside and be worried about the evil eye constantly.
Yeah.
You know, or honor killings. Honor killings are an unfortunate part of some parts of Palestinian society. It's actually not supposed to happen. Or even revenge. You're not really supposed to take revenge like at the drop of a hat. Like you're not supposed to kill anyone connected to that person's tribe. You know, you're supposed to go to court, stuff like that. But it was in the past very blurry what is actually religion and what isn't. And so yeah, there's weird things like that. It's, to be honest with you, it's really interesting. Like when you talk to the older Palestinians, they do really weird stuff, and you're like they used to be like, we used to joke that do you guys know Yapta south of Hebron?
No, I don't know that.
People used to joke, they're like, they don't light candles, or they don't light fires on Saturdays. People used to joke like that, and it's like, now, yeah, like people used to joke about it. Whether it's like why they chose not to, who knows? Like maybe in the long time ago there was some sort of connection, you know, or putting knives on the windows on Eid. No one does that anymore. But like I know my grandma and dad used to put like knives and lean them against every window, and it's like we don't know where that tradition came from. We don't know why it stopped, but yeah.
That's really
just a little weird thing.
So just like stick knives on the window just to let people know, I'll stab you.
No, it's just like kind of like leaning it against the window, like, and then it's like just stop the devil coming out.
That's similar when we have Hanukkah. We put Hanukkah
on the window still. Yeah, we don't put it against the window though. It's weird. I guess people maybe like draw traditions from their own personal experiences or the experiences of
it could be anything. The problem is we didn't write anything down.
Like family traditions are like anybody can start one, and if you just keep doing it while your kids are little, like odds are it's just going to get stuck with them.
Yeah, I guess so. Especially if you tell them it's related to religion.
Yeah. Or you just tell them it's luck. My mom has made me superstitious as hell when it comes to like luck, like ghosts and spirits, and like I don't really believe any of it, but I still feel uncomfortable whenever I look at like occult stuff, and it's because of her.
Yeah. Well, you went in what was it? The like there was some weird like grotto thing.
Oh yeah, that the memorial that the army tried to take us to. There was like this memorial to a terror attack that blew up a bus.
Yeah.
And, there was a grotto with like vines hanging on it, water going through it, and like people had put the names of the victims on like wood plaques and just nailed them to the trees and hung them there.
Be a bit eerie, yeah.
Yeah, that's fucking eerie. And then you go out of the grotto. And they have a stone circle with water flowing in between the rocks.
Jared was like, "I'm not going in there. No chance."
I'm not. Like, dude, the commanders, they tried to get me to go in there. I'm just like, nope. Y'all can get stuck with a fucking demon. I ain't fucking with that shit. Not me.
Do you guys like believe in the devil like that? From
Not really.
Not really. It's just me.
An Israeli guy told me he's just a guy that like challenges people. Like he just says argument for argument's sake or something. Like he's not like
No,
this
it's
guy
like
that's constantly whispering in your ear, like telling you bad things.
yeah, in Judaism, the idea of the devil is just evil inclination, and like
Okay.
Adam and Eve, snake, and everything. And
Yeah.
we believe in hell, but we believe that when you die, like before you get through to heaven, you have to go through like a period of making up for what you did spiritually. You have to make up for things until
my grandparents told me that like traditionally it was just obliteration. Your soul either went back to God or your soul just stopped existing.
that's like very fire and brimstone Catholic feel to it.
Well, I mean, there wasn't any torture, but I mean, I was also raised pretty atheistically. They just said like you either go to God or you just stop existing. It's not very fire and brimstone.
No,
But then again, I'm American, and my idea of fire and brimstone is the absolute fuckery that the Baptists will just scream at you on the street corner.
Scary stuff. Scary
It
stuff.
really is. Like they should not be allowed near children. They really shouldn't.
Well, Tarek, I wanted to ask you. This is something that comes up a lot in American Christian society, evangelicals especially. There's like a mistranslation that they take from the Bible, and they believe that Har Megiddo, right? Megiddo is going to be the location of Armageddon, right? And they've made some kind of weird connection to Megiddo. And it always worries me as a citizen of this land, you know, that these guys, they invest so much money in Israel. They pump money into here. They come out here on holidays, which is fantastic. But I worry that they have this agenda to cause some type of Armageddon over here, you know?
They do. That is their agenda.
Are they growing? Kind of. I see videos of like the big mega churches thing, but I don't know. It doesn't seem long term. It doesn't seem sustainable. I know like they seem to be packed, but like if you look at the churches that have lasted the test of time, it's like okay, the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, like these they're very different than like the electric guitar kind of like
Well, I mean, televangelist churches really only last like maybe 1 or 2 generations, like the founder, and he gets really huge, and then his kids, but then like it comes out that like the kid fucked a prostitute or something. Even the founder would have fucked a prostitute. There's a lot of scandals about televangelists and prostitutes, and like people will just slowly start leaving. They might rebuild, but like after like 1 or 2 generations of preachers, these things kind of die down, but there will always be somebody else to start up another church. That's the thing about
it doesn't seem as sustainable. In regards to what you said, Amir, it's an interesting concept, to be honest with you, because when you do see, I know it's a weird thing, like nearly every Israeli has told me like, oh, I just wish foreign people wouldn't get involved in the conflict. I wish foreign people wouldn't get involved in the conflict. And I get it for Palestinians, it's a bit of a different perspective because, you know, like for you guys, you have the army, you have this and that. So it's like,
yeah, sure.
It's like these people just seem to get in the way of a lot of peace deals, stuff like that.
Sure.
But like, obviously for many Palestinians, they're very, it's like the last card in the deck is kind of like people caring, even though it seems to be caring less and less. Like, I don't think it's in the top 10 of most countries these days, to be honest with you. Like, you know, like you'll have a country like Turkey saying we want to support Palestine while trading nonstop with Israel. You have the EU that recognizes like Palestinian state doesn't actually do it. Like, doesn't seem like they send solar panels, they help people in Area C. Like, that's nice. Like, they send solar panels. Yeah. At the same time, I think it's next to. I don't think it'd ever be possible to get people not to care, not just because of the religious side aspect, just because of the way the countries are tied together. Like, I know maybe Israel doesn't need the foreign aid, but as long as there is foreign aid coming from America to Israel, it's going to be like a talk from nearly most sides of politics. Whether it's like the libertarians will use like foreign aid as a thing, Democrats will say, well, since we're sending money, we should have some sort of influence, and so. And then it's. I don't think it's going to go off the radar anytime soon, but I don't think it's going to be in the top 20 kind of thing. But as for the evangelicals, I think it's a weird thing, to be honest with you, because it's kind of like, I don't know. For me, I've tried to understand. I like try and respect everyone's beliefs. It's like the religion was founded, let's say 2,000 years ago, and it's like, 200 years ago we figured it out. Like the other 1,800 years, not some kind of thing. It is a bit dicky to me. But as in, I don't know, like, it's because I went to a Catholic school, like, for them, like, everything when it talks about Israel, for them, it's like the church is Israel, which probably doesn't make you guys comfortable either.
Definitely.
Huge complaints.
But as in, yeah, so it's a weird thing, to be honest with you. I think people always care. I think they send a bit of money to the evangelicals, but as in, how do I say it? Israelis will take their money, but I don't think Israelis will listen to them.
Well, I mean, we don't really listen, but I mean, like, if somebody shows up to your house and just says, "Here's a check for $50," you'd be like, "I bet." Just close the door.
Yeah. I think,
Yeah.
Israelis will take them. I remember there used to be a guy, Benny Hinn and stuff. By the way, like, what's it called? Benny Hinn. He was from he used to like just go up and he used to he used to do massive like open air and just slap people on the head and like bless them. But he was originally from Jaffa or Haifa, and he used to stay at the Legacy Hotel in Jerusalem. And he was just like the funniest guy in the world, apparently. Like everyone said, he's like really nice, stuff like that. But when he'd get on stage, just completely change and just slap on the head, like slap on the head.
Yeah. Make people. What did he do? Make people feel like they're burning with hellfire or something on stage.
I remember him like giving a speech where he just like said something like in the crowd, like 50 people just dropped, and then like he said, "I bless you." This got back up, and it was just like. And the problem is, this sounds so terrible. But as in, because he is like just an Arab from Haifa or Jaffa, I just don't believe he believes it. This sounds terrible, but I just believe, like, as in, like, in my heart, I'm just like, you're lying. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying, in my heart, I just see an Arab guy just slapping heads. That's what I see.
It's very far-fetched, to be honest. When you watch him, it's almost like it's a stage show, like Darren Brown.
I can believe that like a Middle Eastern person will be a Muslim or an Orthodox Christian or a Catholic, but like I can't. When I see Middle Eastern people doing the whole Protestant thing, like the new ones, not even like Anglican Lutheran, like the new like evangelical thing. It's terrible, but I assume that like I just see them how I see like people in like Jerusalem. It's like, okay, this person's pretending. This person sees a crowd and he's just I'm not saying that's the case. It's just that's what maybe the worst part of my heart believes. Like my heart believes he's just an Arab guy who's lying. He's just an Arab that's going like God bless you and hitting them and stuff like that. It's like
I mean the act is probably him lying, because I mean like these people, at least the ones in America, they absolutely are fucking lying, and they know they're lying. But I don't doubt that they might believe some of their bullshit, because eventually, if you spout bullshit enough, you're gonna start believing it yourself, and then you're really fucked. But they absolutely do start out lying. These people can get up on a stage, look a person in the eye, and say, "Don't send your money to the hospital to deal with your cancer. Here, go cancer in the name of Jesus. There, you're fucking cured." I'm
down with like prayer and stuff, but the whole over the top thing does throw me off a little bit. I'm all for religion 100%, but anything over the top, I'm just like, I'm like, okay, I believed you until you did that part there. You know what I mean? Like when you see someone who's just like, "Do you want to give money to charity?" You're like, "Oh, God bless you," kind of thing. But when they're over the top, you're like, "This is a lie. This is just I shouldn't say that." That's how I feel. You know what I mean? It's like,
you should. We need to call out these people because they're fucking parasites taking advantage of people's faith. They should be called out.
Well, I'll give you an example from my life that made me very, very angry, Tarek, and it kind of has something to do with the subject, right? So I was working in Ireland for a Google sister company and dealing with clients over here in Israel, helping them out with their Google Ads campaigns and stuff like that. And I had a client who, looking into his account, it was basically somebody saying that he can help, bring back your lost loved ones and can help you communicate and all this kind of stuff. And when the guy was on the phone to me, all he wanted to do was just make more money, and I just felt disgusted. Like I had to help this guy, but I don't want to help this guy. You know what I mean? He's literally just preying off, poor, innocent religious people that believe this stuff and call in for his help.
It's like what we said before we went live, kind of thing. It's like a lot of like the rumors, like a lot of Palestinian society, well, at least in Jerusalem, anyways, that like the gypsies, all this stuff. Like in my grandparents' time, would do like weird black magic and stuff, and it's like. You would think like the groups that did black magic would be in a better off position. I know like Jared has a different opinion. Like as in it's like
well, I mean, it's black magic. They're obviously good at hiding it.
It's like if gypsies were doing black magic, it's like it's not showing. Like also like so like it's just it doesn't seem to be working out. Like it seems to be like they don't seem to be living any better.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I guess one little topic I did want to touch on as well. This is getting into some serious stuff now. The situation in Gaza is dire, right, Tarek? And it has been for so long now. Very, very saddening situation. What do you think the average person can do to try and change the status quo, and even to help Gazans that are in need over there? Like, what do you think is the best?
Should we start flinging food over the fence, like just slingshotting whole chickens? Would that help? Probably
I think
lower
with
food
Gaza,
prices.
I think with Gaza, like generally all we get, like it's just like charity, to be honest with you, like because right now it's like Gaza is like the worst example of why the status quo for Palestinians is untenable. As in, because right now the status quo, you look at it like so Israelis, like if you look at Hasbara, like the Israelis just be like, we're sending food over here, stuff like that. It's like those Israeli companies like how things are because the Israeli government is sending bits of food and aid from those Israeli companies to Gaza. The Israelis are quite happy with the current status quo. They allow money from Qatar to go to Hamas, and in return, Hamas tones down. Think about it. It's like when something happens, like the balloon, stuff like that, they cause damage. But like when rockets happen, it's not that often. Like it happens, but it's as in, it's usually when the checks haven't gone through. So it's this weird status quo thing, where it's like really Netanyahu kind of gets a benefit and Hamas gets a benefit. And to be honest, the people in Sderot, like really, they're not living any better. Like at any time, it could go to shit. Well, the people in Gaza, there's no real predictability, as in the siege from Egypt and Gaza. Like people don't know when you go to Gaza, right? When you go through Egypt, there's like 8 checkpoints. And so what happens is the Egyptian soldiers open your bags, throw everything on the ground. So you go, okay, you pack it up. Then you go to the next Egyptian checkpoint. They're like, why is the stuff in the bag? Was it checked? You go, yeah, it was checked. So they open up and throw it on the ground again. And this is to get into Gaza. Like this is 8 times over. And so, while there's stuff there, it's like the quality of life is very like it's just there's no real predictability. Like as in there could be a war, even though there hasn't been a real war since 2014. Like there was 2 days of like non-stop fighting. I think last year or the year before. I think 2019.
Yeah, there was a couple years ago. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like really. Sorry, go.
There is an important distinction to make. I would say though that I think the Israeli government is definitely happy with the status quo, but I would say the Israeli people are more indifferent. Like the ones that live in the center, at least, they're not affected by anything that happens out there. Like it's so far removed from their reality. But the government, no doubt, they're happy with the status quo because they have the power. And
absolutely. It's in like most. I agree with you. Most Israelis don't wake up and think of Palestinians. Like most Israel, like if you're in Tel Aviv, you're going to wake up and think about your friends, your work, stuff like that. The status quo is many Israelis like for them like it's tenable. You know what I mean? Like if you live in the West Bank, the people, the Israelis in the West Bank will say we need to annex like this and that, or we need to live like this. But if you're an Israeli in Tel Aviv, like you don't need to really experience the conflict. Like really, you don't need to. Even in like North.
Yeah, the only time we do is when I was just going to say like the only time people like on this side of the line really do experience the conflict is when violence flares up. Like the attitude on this side is just basically just manage the conflict. We tried going somewhere, didn't happen, so let's just manage it so at least I can go about my day without having to be scared of my neighbor.
For me, obviously, I would like want the siege to be ended, stuff like that. But once like I said, it's one of those things where it's like, what will actually happen? What can we do? And then what I would like to happen. Yeah. So honestly, I would want people to look into charity, stuff like that, helping Gaza. But to be honest with you, it's a very unlivable situation. You have the siege. I mean, even to leave the country to study. I know someone who got their master's in Spain, and they applied for their master's in Spain, got it, and that was such a hassle. The only way they actually got out of the country was because they weren't being let out by the Israelis because you need permission to come in and out a lot of the time. And it was only because of international pressure that he was able to leave and study. So it's a really tough situation there. And I think the reason why I think many Palestinians, even like Israelis like Rafi and others, are so like just constantly talking about like we need a federation, we need some sort of plan now, we need a plan now, is because they're looking into the future and like, okay, for most Israelis, the situation it's on the front of their minds, it's in the back of their minds, and people are just going by their day-to-day business. And so many Palestinians are constantly worried, like, okay, when is an intifada going to happen? When's an uprising going to happen? Now, it won't be the same as in the past because, you've got like the wall, you've got all these things. But as in every year, the situation seems to get worse and worse and worse, like economically speaking, like worse and worse and worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so is it going to happen when the money runs out with the Palestinian Authority? Like, what exactly is going to happen? And so a few Israelis who I think are thinking very like much into the future, and many Palestinians are really like constantly saying, trust me, like we need to do something. We need to give, because people can't live on like bread alone kind of thing. As in, you need to give them hope, you need to give them something. And it's like, okay,
100%.
it really seems like Gaza's like Hamas is becoming like the PA in Gaza, where Hamas is like maintaining like the rule, maintaining the status quo in return for checks coming in. That's what it seems like. And so with Gaza, really all I can tell people to do is like just look at charities and hope and pray. But the West Bank it's just getting like worse and worse and worse. That makes sense. Like Gaza's terrible. People in the West Bank probably have a better way of living. That is in the people in Gaza can at least tell themselves like we freed the land. We're running our own affairs. It's not necessarily true. Like their borders, everything's controlled by others, Egypt and Israel. But yeah, it's a very strange situation. It shocks many Palestinians that when they find out Israelis don't think about them. If that makes sense, because for Palestinians you cannot not think about Israel. Like for Palestinians, like even if you just stay in Area A, it's like if there's like a heightened tensions, the Israelis will come into Area A sometimes. And if it isn't, if you want to leave the country, we have to go to an Israeli-controlled border control. It's for Palestinians, it's next to impossible to not think about Israelis. Does that make sense? Like especially in the West Bank, like you're going to think about them. If you're driving on the road, you're going to see the Israeli plates. You're going to do all this stuff. For you guys, it's like for most Israelis, it's not necessarily the most important thing. You're going to think about women. You're going to think about like going out with your friends. You're going to be thinking about all this stuff. It's like it's completely different.
It depends where you live though as well, Tarek. You know, like I'm from the south. So you know,
you're
like,
in the Negev, you're going to see Bedouins, you're going to see this stuff, you know. And if you're in Sderot, you're going to see Gaza. If you're in like West Bank, different story. I think in like Galilee, it's different.
With the things they think and the way that they're thinking right now, they're happy to maintain the status quo because it's kind of working for them. But realistically, no one should have to be incentivized to fix humanitarian issues, of course. But if it's another kind of incentive, I think the financial and economic benefits that we would reap from fixing the problems are insane. Because imagine how fantastically this whole region would do in terms of tourism if it was peaceful. Like what in the world is better and means so much to so many people than this area?
Sure.
I think I think you're right. I think the Israelis and Palestinians being Middle Eastern, I think it sounds terrible, but as if you look at it, it's like what brings people to the table is usually, unfortunately, violence. Whether it's like the Intifada or this, or even like with how things are, like the only reason like the Israelis and the Arabs are talking like Saudi Arabia stuff like that is because they're scared of Iran. Kind of thing. That's what the main thing bringing them together. You know what I mean? Like, it's in the people. Even though there was never really a conflict between Dubai and Israel. Like, as in, you know, the people in Saudi Arabia, they were never like, they're not beckoning their leaders like, you need to talk to Israel now. They're like, okay, Iran's on the doorstep. Maybe they're not so bad. That's how it is, you know. So let's hope it doesn't lead to something violent. But I think if I was a betting man, I would think that things will get to like explosive levels, tinderbox levels, then I think we'll work something out. Or it'll just come to the point where they're like, okay, this is pretty much all Israel now. Like, there's not even Area A. What are we going to do? And it'll be a civil rights kind of thing where it's like protests, stuff like that. That's what I think will happen. Hopefully it doesn't get to that. But you know, that being said, you know, history is made by determined minorities. So it's very possible for things to change. It is quite possible. I think it will just need to get to a certain level, you know, because I like the formats. Like we discuss one serious thing, then do 30 tangents. I like that. By the way. Better.
I mean, the whole idea is just the lads talking. That's pretty much.
It's also because of Jared. He has this like thing where he's like a dog that sees a squirrel in the corner of his eye. You know.
Unless when Amir first messaged me, he's like, "Oh, we'll talk about this and that." If I had wrote it down and put it like here, like in front of the thing, I'd be like, "Guys, back to." But if it's not written down, it's just, oh, yeah, whatever's interesting. Let's go on a tangent, you know. But no, it's like.
I mean, we do structure it a little more sometimes, but I mean, for this one, we were just like, let's just make this one chill, a little bit more chill.
Yeah, and I think we've covered a lot of great topics. You know?
Great. It's also fantastic to get another Palestinian's opinions on it because we don't really get to broadcast it that much. And when speak, they're more encouraged by that than just seeing Palestinians encouraging other Palestinians to say this, tell them what's going on.
Well, it's so like, for example, like obviously, I believe there's an occupation, stuff like that. As in, obviously, I support most things Palestinians say. I think for many Palestinians, there is a thing with normalization, as in like it's a complex situation because for us, like Israel's not normal. You know what I mean? Like it's not a normal situation. For me, many Palestinians, so we see we have to talk because you can't not talk, like, and you can't tell the whole world, but not the people you're dealing with, kind of thing. Like I can't say like in England, like, oh, okay, I'm under occupation, stuff like that. I have to like let the Israelis know this is my opinion, this is how I feel. That's what we believe anyway. But because of, I think maybe Jews are like this as well, because we come from like collective societies. If a Palestinian gets out there, like, okay, I was talking to you guys about random personal stuff, that's all well and good. But if we're just talking and then you guys keep saying like, Israel's the greatest country in the world, like Israel's amazing, I'm going like, yeah, I like the weather, stuff like that. If I don't bring up like how the average Palestinian experiences Israel, then it's like, okay.
And you're a bad Palestinian kind of thing.
Yeah, it is like that. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not like saying like Hamas style or PA style putting people in prison. I'm not saying that. But at the same time, unless the Palestinian goes out there and says, oh yeah, like I am just like, if they just say I'm not a Palestinian, I'm like this, like I'm Muhammad, I'm George, I'm this, okay, that's fine. But if they go on there, it's like I am a Palestinian. Like for example, I can speak on behalf of my family, that's several thousand strong, when I talk about the occupation. I can speak about that. Now, if I talk about like my opinion on like urban planning, I'm probably just going to be my opinion. I can say, okay, as Tarek, I think we should do this, this, and that. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it does annoy many Palestinians when you have a Palestinian out there who's like, man, this is so crazy. We have so much in common. It's true. Like culturally, a lot of the stuff like Israelis and Palestinians have in common. But just like, for an Israeli, if I just point out constantly like 1948, all this stuff, and the Israeli doesn't once mention, well, for us, according to like our history, this happened, or like, in the 2000s, there was this, and that. I don't think the Israeli will be very popular with Israelis. For us, it's like that, but extreme, because like our families are living in the situation. Like, most people have someone who has either died or, like as Amir brought up Hebron before, like I know Beth Salem is not very popular among Israelis, but like a lot, let's just say 10% of the videos are real. It's like, that's still too many,
Yeah.
And so, it is a thing where like, it is a thing where we do kind of have to bring it up, It's a thing where I know many Israelis do find it really annoying. That like, about the whole like Palestinians, like whenever they talk, they want to cover their face, stuff like that. But it's for a number of reasons. It's not just it's like they don't want any trouble with Israelis, but also like especially with the Palestinian side. But that comes from many Palestinians just kind of wanting to forget the conflict. That makes it. Many Palestinians just want to be a normal person. But the thing is, when you're a Palestinian, you can't be a normal person. It sucks. That's how it is. Like,
it's kind of the same for Israelis. It's kind of the same for Israelis. Anywhere we go, we're going to get questioned about Israel and about this and about that.
Yeah, it's probably frustrating. But it's like, put it this way, like this sounds bad, but even someone like me, I'm comfortable talking to you guys. If you're talking to a liberal Palestinian and like they don't mention it once, in the back of my mind, I'm kind of like, you're going to bring up one thing? You're going to bring, like, isn't I'm just like, you're going to like, isn't where you're going to mention, like, if they bring up like, oh, there's like, our culture's too conservative. It's like, true, but you're not going to, there's an elephant in the room here. And it's a thing where even the most like pro-peace Palestinian will like want to punch the screen when they see like a Palestinian who's just kind of like, like they just criticize their own. If that makes sense, kind of thing. Like, I think the way many Israelis like imagine how like a Haaretz writer is, because I've talked to a few Haaretz people and they literally like support Israel within 67, which I know isn't a popular opinion. As in like, when Israelis talk about like leftists kind of thing, how Israelis go, oh, they hate themselves, they hate this. It's like, So it's like that in our culture to an extent. We represent, we're a collective people. It's like, if you don't want to like speak for everyone else, then sucks to be you.
But I mean, like, that's also the most annoying thing about speaking for everyone else and like having to toe the line is like, who gets to decide what the line is, what the position is, of that collectivist society. And I mean, like, Israel does have its issues with that, but but Israel's way more free to have people decide.
I don't think you guys have family pressure as much. I don't think you guys have like an honor culture. I don't think you guys would have like, you guys don't have the honor culture kind of thing. Like as in free, I don't think Israelis will say like, well, maybe they will, but like, for example, there's a joke where like there was studies done where I think it was like 80% of Palestinians said they support Sharia law, and like paying Palestinians, like they go like, okay, but how was that done? Because if someone asks most Palestinians in public, they'll go, yeah, of course, but it's like behind the scenes, like no, it's like, okay, you're asking me and my family.
I just like to imagine that scenario where like somebody just stops a Palestinian on the street, goes, "Hey, do you support Sharia law?" He's just like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." Dude walks back into an alleyway where it's dark, just goes, yeah.
No, it's one of those things where it's like, obviously, like, for example, it differs from area to area. Some areas are more conservative, stuff like my family's quite socially conservative. But at the same time, it's like, okay, you, because of the honor culture, because of the family, you'll say what is good for the family. You'll say what is like to make you guys look good. It's not necessarily lying because there's an element of truth to it. Some people will actually believe it. But as in, I don't think you guys have that. Like, for example, I don't think it's a big deal unless like someone in your family votes like center or center left, maybe. I don't know. Like,
it depends what part of society you come from, you know, because in certain communities within Israel, in certain very ultra orthodox, there's huge pressure to keep the family way. Yeah, you know, they're quite extreme, Tarek, to the point where if a son or a daughter became secular, they would say a prayer on the death of a family member. But again, that is the like outliers.
That's like a minority. Yeah.
You would also have. I met a friend of mine who, he came from an orthodox background. Used to keep Shabbat. Used to keep the religion like to the letter of the law, according to the way they see it, right? And his family, it took them time to accept him. Not keeping Shabbat and not doing all the things and not. But eventually, they managed to find peace between them, which I think is very nice. And there's a lot to be learned from that, because we've kind of covered it here on the podcast a little bit, that the different ideologies here within the land, within Palestinian society and within Israeli society, are so far apart from each other that finding the balance between them is kind of like, to me, it's kind of the secret to solving a lot of societal problems.
So whatever solution there is, I do want some form of localism, because, for example, like people in Ramallah tend to be not as much, but as in like Ramallah, there's a lot of secular, like quite a lot of secular like areas, stuff like that. Bet Jala, most parts of Bethlehem, there's a very strong Christian culture, but it's pretty much, that just means like a little, like that just means it's like pretty free, just as a little bit of social conservatism in some areas. That's pretty much what it means. Like, you can go to bars, stuff like that. In Hebron, it's extremely conservative in most parts, like most, and there's a strong tribal culture. So as in whatever the solution is, I think that people should be able to at least have their spaces to breathe, if that makes sense, kind of thing. But those, you see, well, yeah, it's on a large scale, it makes sense. If it's just a room in a college door, like in a college.
But, we'll get into that can of worms later.
Oh yeah, but it's like, no, if you go to like say what you want about the Hasidic areas, but it's like, it's good that they have like their areas. They have an Park, they have a shrine, because it's like, if they were living in secular, if they were in like just random every few houses in Tel Aviv, you had a Hasidic person, probably be clashes. You'd probably be annoyed like if people doing this. So it's like, in a way,
even with them in their areas, there's still kind of clashes.
There are.
People don't really like each other.
Yeah. There's a hell of a lot of fractured factions and splintering.
My dad's told me stories about driving. Is it Meerstream? Driving his car. Yeah, literally, like he had rocks thrown in his car and stuff. Through just like he just missed that window where it just becomes Shabbat or something, and like rocks have been thrown on the car.
Yeah, like people would throw rocks in there. If you're a woman and you're not covered to their satisfaction, they will just spit on you.
They do, yeah. It's terrible.
Really. If anything, it's very indigenous behavior. It's kind of
sometimes.
Indigenous behavior.
I always say, like, whenever Israelis feel like people deny they're from the land, it's like, we'll just show them the average Israeli, and it's like they'll be like, oh yeah, he's an asshole from the Middle East. He's an asshole.
So that's pretty much it.
We are about to run out of time. I think we're.
It's late for you guys. Yeah.
Kane, why are you stealing my thunder?
Because you don't do your job properly.
It was like, I do apologize. We just went on like 110. So I think like every 20 minutes we like 1 minute of seriousness, then it's like 20 minutes of joking around.
If you got questions were answered, don't you worry your handsome little face. All right, it's okay, baby.
We're all been blessed by God here.
Yeah, we've all been blessed by the great spaghetti monster in the sky. Anyway, guys.
That's what Jared believes in, apparently.
Yeah, obviously, dude. That God's delicious. All right, he's got that spicy pesto sauce. Anyway, episode's over.